Hello, horrorphiles. You're listening to Dissecting Horror, examining the anatomy of fear in film, television, and literature. I'm writer and performer Kelsey Zukowski.
I'm filmmaker Stephen Aguilera. Today we are joined by the great curator of creepypasta, Lady MCreepsta.
We are the Horror Whisperers, your champions of horror and the keepers of the fearscape on this podcast of frightsome delights, if you will.
I will. And we hope you will join us too, won't you? I wanted to expound upon female-driven filmmaking. There is a perception of gatekeeping in the industry about women filmmakers. I was curious as to you guys' take on that. Do you have any sense of like there's an oppression of women, or is there something lacking or any kind of talking point about favorite female writers / directors that we can throw into this?
I mean, I don't see that is always an interesting conversation to me, right? Every time the Oscar nominations come out, if there's no female directors, it's all over the news and stuff like that. But it's always, to me, it's always a very interesting conversation because do we just nominate a female director because we don't have any female directors, for example? But at the same time, it's considering the disproportion of male directors versus female directors. If we don't put the spotlight, is it ever going to change? So for me, that's always not the word's not a touchy topic, but it is always I don't think is as black and white as as we want it to be. And this is me coming from even a minority perspective. So I'm not from the United States. I'm from a country where we're multiracial, multicultural, multilingual. There is one predominant race in the country. Now, universities, right? So for public universities, if you apply for university after you finish high school, there is a quota as well. X amount of percentage of people, from this race or religion get accepted, X amount from this, X amount from that, right? So what ends up sometimes happening is that because there are more seats in university for a particular race to enter, you can get in with lower university scores compared to like another minority where there's only like maybe a handful of seats. Now you've got to be really good to get in there, right? So it's almost, to me, it feels something like that. How we fix it, I don't know. How we fix that, I do not know. It's way past my brain processing power. But in terms of representation or if there's I don't know if there's an oppression, but I do know as a female, and this is again, I literally had the discussion earlier today with a couple of my girlfriends. I think that we are treated differently, and we are treated. It sounds so obvious, but we are treated differently by our male counterparts. For some reason, I think sometimes we are seen, and this goes across the board, not just in filmmaking, just females in general, we are expected to be nicer than, we're expected to be polite. And if we're not polite, then we're just, a rude bitch. But like if a man is not polite, and he's stern, and he's firm, and he's assertive. So there is that whole... there's that whole part of the conversation, or part of just being female that we have to deal with. Now, whether that translates to us being oppressed when it comes to filmmaking, I don't know. I don't know. You don't see as many female directors, and when you do see a female director, and especially if it's a female director that suddenly directed an action film, you're like, oh wow. Yeah. But it shouldn't be that way, right? It's like, she likes action films. She can direct a car chase, same as a guy. Like, she drives cars too. There should be that wow factor. But yeah, I think it is. I don't know. I don't know how to fix it. I have no ideas. No ideas. Does anybody have ideas? I don't know. I don't know.
I definitely think that there should be, we should be giving female filmmakers or minority filmmakers or anything along those lines more opportunity, definitely elevate them and highlight them when given the chance. Because, yeah, it is a super, super small percentage. And I don't think it's necessarily that like, oh, well, women just don't make films or they're just not interested in that. I don't think that's really the case. So there is maybe more that can still be done to, highlight and celebrate them. And you have seen a lot of cases of that, certain programs or objectives to try to do that. So, but I also agree that it, like, if, I don't know, if one film can be chosen or one person's directing is going to be highlighted, I don't necessarily think that if, one directed by a man is, I don't know, it's hard to say better because it's art, it's subjective, but to say one is just incredible and then like, oh, well, this one has some decent things about it, but it was directed by a woman. Like, I don't think you should just give it to the woman director, you know? It should be, the work should kind of stand for itself, but I also, obviously, there is maybe more that can be done to give maybe women filmmakers more opportunities.
But yeah, so like, but then it goes into like, but why isn't there more stunning things in this women-made film? Probably because she didn't get the funding. Why? Because she's a it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Like, it's like a rabbit hole that never ends. So
and it has been a male-dominated field for a long time. So it's still working through, I guess, breaking out of that.
I like that it's being addressed, though, because that's the first step, right? It's being addressed. And I think we never get anything right the first try, but at least there is the try, right? So like, the whole, are there any female directors nominated? Are they not? Are they this and that? The fact that people are concerned enough to make, a noise about it, that's great. Because what would be more upsetting is if that happened and then it was highlighted and everybody's like, whatever. Like, but the fact that there are people having that conversation, oh, but should they be nominated just because they're female? But they didn't make great films anyway. But why didn't they make great films? I like that is happening because that's where you start. You have that conversation and it won't be, it's not going to be fixed by next year or even like the year after, but at least there's the try, right? We're trying to get there. So
I think there's a certain difference in style. Like if you look at a woman's handwriting versus a man's, you can look at it and go, oh, a woman wrote that. You can just tell that there's a certain difference or flair, a femininity to handwriting that extends into all aspects, other aspects of their lives as well. And I think that includes their art. And I was able to spot that women made this film. The Cabinet of Curiosities episode, okay, this feels way different from all of the others. And that's okay. I want to see different viewpoints. But I think that because it's been so male-dominated for decades, that we're accustomed to seeing that style of filmmaking. And so when a different style enters, it stands out or suddenly just feels disorienting in some way. In my filmmaking, no budget, micro budget levels that I've been dealing with clientele and so forth for, 12 years or so, we have no studios. There's no money. There's no institution backing any of these people. They're just getting on Craigslist and assembling people. Yet there's still the exact same proportion of men and women. I think that it's just a choice that certain genders lean towards. I did a casting call online a few weeks ago for two comparable roles, one for a man and one for a woman. And my experience is whenever I've done this, probably 4 to 5 times more women respond to casting calls than men. Yet there's probably about 80% male on crews. So I think generally speaking, women prefer to be in front of the camera than behind it. That's not an absolute, but generally speaking, that's been my observation. And you can't blame it on patriarchy or the system or anything else. It's just everybody has a choice at this level to go where they want to go, and that's where they're going. Women in the crews tend to be more makeup and hair or costume or set dressing, that sort of thing. I don't know what the answer is, but I think personal choice, whether it's been built that way through institutional whatever upbringings that we've had, that might be a factor or it might not be. But I don't think that we should vilify one side or another. It is what it is, and I think meritocracy, basing it on the merit of a person's what they're able to produce, is the most important thing and should be supported above all else. And we have to find a balance there somehow.
I think as well, though, it has to do with representation. So, for example, and this will change because things are starting to change now. 50 years from now, we may see a total balance. This may not even be a conversation that is even remembered, let alone had. But I think it has a lot to do with representation in terms of. So, when I was a wee young kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker, right? I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be in front of the camera even. But I told myself that was a pipe dream because I had never seen a filmmaker that was my race, my religion, my creed, or anything like that on stage. Without giving too much away about Lady MCreepsta, I remember being 16 years old and seeing a director who looked like me, whose wife wore the same traditional outfits as I did, get on stage and receive an Oscar for a horror film. And that was the first time I ever thought, oh my goodness, that this may actually be attainable. This is not something just to, you know what, it's something you want to do, but it will never happen. That was the first time I saw somebody who looked like me on stage receiving an Oscar. It was it blew my mind. And I even get goosebumps, like remembering that. Yeah. And that spurred me to going to film school, getting my degree and everything, and, going down that road. And that has to do with what I see on TV. America dominates the film and TV industry 100%. It will be, I arrived in the United States 10 years ago. And yet I guarantee you, if you reference a popular TV show, any popular TV show that you grew up watching, I probably can have a conversation with you because I watch the same TV show, So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. Because if little girls don't see women directing films, it's not even on their radar. So like with me, I remember watching MTV's like behind the scenes where they would show the making of music videos and films, and me thinking, oh, I'd love to do that. But, well, people that look like me don't do this. So you don't do that. So just put that out of your mind. So I think that has a fair amount to do with it as well. I think it was only recently, like when Crazy Rich Asians did as well as it did, that just, that for the Asian community, that blew their minds out of the water. It was incredible. And the thing about that film is they got basically any Asian star that was even half famous, wasn't it? From everywhere, from all over the globe. You put them in this film. And it did as well as it did. Did it deserve to do as well? I mean, it was a good story. It was very well done. Visually, it was all beautiful and everything. But it did as well as it did in the box office because the community came out and watched it 3, 4, 5, 10 times to get those numbers up, But again, it's one of those, if you are a little kid, it's brilliant. If you are a child right now growing up, seeing female directors, and if you're a minority, seeing minority filmmakers just doing this every day like it's nothing, because then to you, it's going to be like nothing. It's like, well, if this is something I want to do, totally attainable, I'm going to grow up and do it. It's not even a conversation. But if you grew up, maybe when we grew up, where it's typically, dominated by, a certain demographic, you sort of, it's not even a thought. You don't even know you want to do it because the thought doesn't even enter your brain that it is something you can do, let alone do for a living. It's just like, well, it's something you just put out of your mind. So I think that has a lot to do with it. 50 years from now, maybe, hopefully, that this is not even a conversation. This is not even a thought. It's just something that happens, that happened way back then, So.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for us holding ourselves back without necessarily having, like, it maybe just never occurred to us, oh, I could be a blah, 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 until we saw something. But there was probably nothing really pinning us down from attaining that. And nothing stopped those first people that got the awards. I mean, they did it. So maybe it's just a matter of us soul searching and just not going into agreement that a certain race or a certain gender or a certain whoever group can or cannot do something, and just doing it anyway and not worrying about it. I think we're in a point now where we're there.
I'm glad that we're there. That's the thing. I'm glad that we are, if we aren't where we should be, we are kind of there, where it's not like if a female says that, hey, you know what, I want to be a director, people don't go like, oh, honey, sit down. Nobody's telling you that, you know. I like that we're there. We have a fair amount of ways to go, but I also think it's just humanity, just, you know, we're constantly growing on so many levels to begin with. So I like that we're where we're at, and I like where it seems that we're going for the most part, you know.
We're not perfect, and I don't think we ever will be, and victimizing ourselves about it probably isn't the way to go. But there's certainly, I don't know if tribalism is the word. There was a story I heard from someone about the original Planet of the Apes, where at lunchtime, all of the actors that were dressed up as orangutans ate by themselves, and all the chimpanzees and all the apes and gorillas, they just naturally, for whatever reason, without being told to do so, went into their own groups based on the same makeup that they were wearing. And I think there's something to be learned from that. Like, people, they feel safer or feel, I don't know, better with their own kind, whatever that kind is, and maybe a little more suspicious or just a little awkward with somebody that's not their own race or goes to the same church or the same high school. It's just I don't pretend to understand it, but we could misinterpret that as some sort of a phobia or something very extreme, and that does exist, obviously. But if we just focus on that, on the bad, and I think we're just making people more divisive. I think we should just sort of ignore it and just sort of like get on with our thing and just do what we want to do and be great at that. And that's the best defense.
I agree. Just put the BS aside and focus on the content, right? For the most part.
Yeah,
right?
I think
the content of the person, the content of what you're producing, that kind of thing. Focus on what is being put out there instead of what is behind it.
But you have to still be vigilant and be alert to putting down any injustices that exist, and be sure that that doesn't get out of hand. There's a balance that you have to strike there.
It's hard being human.
Yeah.
It is super hard being human. I don't like being human.
Well,
I'd rather be my puppy, sit on my couch and get fed and belly rubs and I don't know.
if you'd like to join our Society of Grotesquerie and Loathing, please subscribe and give whatever form of like or approval the platform you are on provides.
Comment your wretched thoughts below, along with what you would like us to expose in future episodes.
Keep our podcast suffering on by finding it in your cold, black, withered hearts to support us on Patreon.
A link to our PayPal is also below for one-time donations of any amount.
It was nice knowing you.